Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 79, Thursday, August 25th, 2022.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by the Maria Von Trapp to my Mary Poppins, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our last Legendary Summer episode. This summer was practically perfect in every way, but it really flew by so fast, Courtney.
I agree, but I feel like we had some great picks. As we shared in our June and July episodes, it's an annual tradition on our show to celebrate summer reading and focus on a theme for 3 or 4 months. This summer, you, our listeners, picked the theme of Disney Legend Memoirs. We titled it our Legendary Summer Series, and we began with Forever Young by Haley Mills, and last month we discussed From Disneyland's Tom Sawyer to Disney Legend, The Adventures of Tom Nabby by Tom Nabby. We are now closing out the series with Homework, a Memoir of My Hollywood Years by Julie Andrews with her daughter Emma Walton Hamilton. We'll once again return to our magical reference book, Disney A to Z, for some background on Dame Julie Andrews. Quote, Andrews, Julie. Actress, appeared in the title role of Mary Poppins, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, and in The Princess Diaries and The Princess Diaries 2, Royal Engagement as Queen Clarice Rinaldi. She narrated Enchanted. She appeared on TV in Eloise at the Plaza and Eloise at Christmas Time as Nanny. She appeared on the grand opening of Walt Disney World Resort TV special in 1971, and The Cat That Looked at a King. She was a company spokesperson for Disneyland for its 50th anniversary in 2005. She was named a Disney legend in 1991. End quote. So that last sentence there is why we have selected her for our memoir as our closing Legendary Summer Series entry. But before we get into that discussion itself, care to provide us with some background on this book, Emily?
Of course. So Homework, that's 2 words. Homework, a Memoir of My Hollywood Years, is Julie Andrews' second memoir. It was published October 10th, 2020 by Hachette Books. Like her previous memoir, it is co-written with her daughter, Emma Walton Hamilton. And here's a description from Hachette Books about the book. Quote, with this second memoir, Homework, a Memoir of My Hollywood Years, Andrews picks up the story with her arrival in Hollywood and her phenomenal rise to fame in her earliest films, Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music. Andrews describes her years in the film industry, from the incredible highs to the challenging lows. Not only does she discuss her work in now classic films and her collaborations with giants of cinema and television, she also unveils her personal story of adjusting to a new and often daunting world, dealing with the demands of unimaginable success, being a new mother, the end of her first marriage, embracing 2 stepchildren, adopting 2 more children, and falling in love with the brilliant and mercurial Blake Edwards. The pair worked together in numerous films, including Victor Victoria, the gender-bending comedy that garnered multiple Oscar nominations. End quote. So this book focuses on her early career in Hollywood from around 1962 to 1986, starting with Mary Poppins and ending with the film That's Life. I found some articles and I garnered a lot of background information from the Chicago Tribune to give us a little bit more insight into the writing of Homework. So first, to write the book, she and her daughter, for both memoirs, would create a timeline and then look for the photographs, diary entries, and other evidence to support that timeline. And then from there, they would select which anecdotes they wanted to include. And then the title Homework, again, 2 words, Homework, is meant to be casual and conversational to match the tone of the book and convey the balancing of a new career and a home life that takes a lot of work. Julie Andrews said in the Chicago Tribune in Homework, quote, in Homework, I am telling the story of my adult life. I wanted to write about how things came at me, about paying my dues, about learning my craft, learning who I was, learning to parent, and all of the homework that I did, end quote. She continues, quote, it was like living my life all over again, except in more detail. At the time, I was busy living my life, working, taking care of my kids, being a wife. It's amazing the amount of things you shove away to get through the day to day. There's a lot of laughter writing this book, but there's also definitely some tears, end quote. So that was a lot of really interesting information. So we are picking up in her second memoir. So the first, she said, was about reflecting on her childhood, but obviously there's going to be a tone shift here. She's reflecting as an adult on her mid-adulthood.
And that one was called Home. So it's a spin-off of that.
Exactly. And we did get a hint at the end of the book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that it looks like there might be a third possibly coming. The way she concludes her epilogue saying, and then I head to Broadway, but that's another story. Like the way she writes it, it seems like she's really going through her entire career, which will be incredible. So I'm curious where she's going to build that next title. So if we have Home, Homework, After School, I don't know.
I believe she alluded to the title in an interview with friend of the podcast, Erin Wallace, for Broadway World, and she's thinking something like Home Stretch. I don't know. We'll see, is what she says. So I like what she's doing there.
I really like that if she's doing multiple memoirs, there's a theme connecting all of them, at least through the titles. I really like that. So let's talk about this book. Overall impressions. What did you like? Format, voice. You and I also read this book differently, again, like Haley Mills.
Yes. Once again, I went for the audiobook since it was available from my local library. I especially enjoy memoirs, and I have now found a new love in audiobooks when the author of an autobiography or memoir reads it themselves. I think it's incredible to hear it in their own words. So certainly just, having Julie Andrews talk to me, quote, not really, but through her audiobook as I was listening on my headphones or driving around was a great way to hear it. And you read it in the traditional fashion.
I did. I tried to get that audiobook format, but it was just not available through any of my libraries, and I've already used my free Audible, so I just read the book. It was a wonderful beach read. I read it on the beach. It was lovely. What I really liked about it, I picked up that conversational tone that the Chicago Tribune talked about, like Haley Mills' memoir. It just felt very much like, or even Tom Nabby's, it just felt very much like someone sitting down with a family member and just sharing stories. But I also liked the pacing. I thought she did a good job with wrapping up her chapters nicely for each film and what she moved on to next. There was a nice clear chronology from going film to film, year to year. But I also there were 2 picture sections. So Haley only had 1. This one had 2. Did you get you didn't get to see all the pictures because of the audiobook.
I'm having FOMO right now. I might need you to text me pictures of the picture section.
Yeah, so there's 2 picture sections, and they're both...
think of that until you mentioned it. I'm like, oh man, but I didn't get the pictures, and I love a good picture section.
So I thought that helped me with the pacing, with where they are. So you go about a third of the book, and there's pictures, and then there's not quite that many between the 2 picture sections, maybe 70 pages. And then there's another picture section, and then you get the last 125 pages. So I felt that I got a reward, yes, I read 130 pages pictures, and then it kept me going. I saw more pictures, and then I was like, oh, home stretch, quote. 130 some pages left. So I felt that it really helped break that up, and the pictures are coordinated to the time frame of what was covered already.
Oh, that's nice. I like when there's multiple sections like that. I absolutely agree on the pacing. Certainly it was quite literally well paced for me in terms of an audiobook, but as you were discussing with the chapter structure, where it maybe some movies spanned 2 chapters, but for the most part it felt like she was chronologizing it along what film she or Blake were working on at the time and the other things going on in her life in those moments. So absolutely agree. Well paced. audio format. I can literally speak to the voice because, I mean, who wouldn't want Julie Andrews reading to you? She's such a great, I feel she's taken on a lot of narrator type roles later on in her life. She narrated Enchanted. She did Bridgerton. So
she mentions that in the memoir too. The first thing that she did animation, or she did a narration over, she actually went for an acting coach. She said because it was her first time doing that, and she realized she was struggling to connect with how do I narrate when I have nothing to interact with, to react to. So she actually went to an acting coach, and that was later in her career. She said it was the first time she went to an acting coach, which was funny because reading that, I'm like, wow, it's her first time narrating. But now think of, like we just said, all the things that we've heard her narrate. One Man's Dream.
Yeah.
Walt Disney Presents.
Yeah, but that wasn't in the A to Z entry. Shame on Disney A to Z, because I love One Man's Dream and I weep almost every time.
Every time. It's like the Bob Thomas biography. We know it's coming.
When she's like, and it wasn't started by a mouse. It was started by a man. A man with a dream. And you're like, it was. You're right, Julie. It was a really bad Julie Andrews impression, but it's fine. It's fine. As you shared, though, this is Andrew's second memoir, and full transparency, neither of us read her first, which was Home, a memoir of my early years. But we felt, it's about her Hollywood years. We're doing Disney Legends. I would say a lot of her legendary status is attributed to Mary Poppins and her Hollywood work. But I appreciated that she gave us a SparkNotes summary of Home. She fully acknowledged, like, hey, you might not have read my first book, so if you didn't, here's the highlights. I appreciated that. What did you take from that intro? Was there anything that caught your attention or that you'd like to go back to her first memoir to learn more about?
This is going to sound naive of me a little bit, but recognizing that she grew up during World War II, like as a child, that really took me for a second. Like, I know she's older, and like obviously she was in Mary Poppins 1964, but sometimes you don't quite connect that the 1960s are really not that far removed from World War II. So getting that brief understanding of her childhood, of experiencing the Blitz in London, performing for the Queen, so being part of like that patriotism, trying to corral people and bring up morale around the country while this is happening, that she was performing in vaudeville at the time too. So that, her placement in history while also doing theater, was really interesting to me. And I just never thought about her in that time frame. Like, to me, Julie Andrews was born on stage Mary Poppins, or on screen Mary Poppins 1964. So I really didn't think about what came before that. I knew she was discovered on Broadway performing in, I believe it was Camelot.
Well, she had done My Fair Lady at that point. It's Camelot that Walt goes to visit
Walt
her
goes to, yes.
and
so
offer her the role.
But that's the earliest I know of Julie Andrews. So I really enjoyed that intro chapter, and I would like to go back especially to read more about her time on stage, because it's interesting that we know her a lot for film, I guess because film reaches more people, a larger audience at one time, but actually the bulk of her career between her childhood and then after Hollywood, these Hollywood years, is actually on stage.
Right. I would be interested in absolutely probably listening to the audiobook, because I enjoyed my experience of this one, to hear her speak about her time in Camelot and My Fair Lady and other Broadway or West End productions. So I love Golden Age musicals, and I feel like those fall in the range of that. So maybe it's weird to experience them out of order, but again, appreciated that she's like, you might not have read it, but here's what you need to know. And I thought that was great grounding to kick us off.
So we briefly brought up Haley already, but while reading, immediately I noticed a lot of similarities between Haley Mills and Julie Andrews, and you and I started texting back and forth about this. So I want to talk about some of those similarities that we noticed. Do you want to name one first?
I mean, the big thing for me was the integration of diary or journal text. I'm impressed that these women have kept those diaries with them most of their lives, and were able to directly quote and integrate some of those entries into the text. So that was a big parallel for me, but agreed, there were many.
Both also got their start on stage, even though Julie has a much longer stage career, but they both got started doing those small short performances or and with their families. They both got started with family. So Haley Mills with her father, John Mills, Julie Andrews with her mother and her stepfather were vaudeville performers. So their parents had a huge influence on starting both of their careers, which we're going to talk more about their parents as well.
Yeah, and I feel they also had similar experiences. I know Julie's a bit older than Haley, but they were raised in England and then navigated over to Hollywood around a very similar time. So the experience of maybe somewhat culture shock coming from this theatrical world into the film industry on a completely different climate and country.
And also balancing that home life, that they had families, they both still had family in England. Haley was still predominantly based in England as a child actor, and it was a lot of negotiating of, can we do films closer to home so that they can try to have a better work-life balance? They both had to navigate a lot of that as well.
I saw similarities in their personality in that they both seemed to be very attuned with their own feelings and their reactions to situations, as well as just being cognizant of the choices they were making as actresses and actors. Like, they didn't have any major scandals that I can think of, and I felt that was conscious choices on their behalf. I mean, Julie Andrews shares that she was at a party and some drugs were offered to her, and she's like, no thanks, I don't want to do cocaine. I don't know that we got that depth from Haley, but just similar. I don't really know how to fully describe their personalities, but I felt that if they haven't met, I would assume they have. They would get along swimmingly.
I want to say maybe that similarity in their personality might be a sense of responsibility. They're both Julie and Haley were financially supporting their families. So maybe there was a piece of that they felt responsible or loyal, obligated. I'm not sure quite which word, depending on what type, at what point in the book you're reading, any of those verbs could work there, that they had to provide and they didn't want to do anything to sacrifice that. Both of them would take opportunities, both that they wanted, but also some that, like, there were points where Julie really wanted to take a rest and just have family time. She's like, but I need to keep working. So she took projects that she ended up loving and good opportunities, but recognizing I can't just not work.
Lots of similarities, as we shared, but I do feel there were some major differences between their film careers, especially their Disney careers. What did you pick up on?
So first, I don't think Julie, even though she mentions that she is concerned about being typecast as the nanny after Mary Poppins, and then a similar character, Maria Von Trapp, and then we do get Nanny from Eloise. She's concerned about getting typecast in that way. However, I don't think she struggled as much as Haley did with that typecasting. And maybe that's because she entered her film career as an adult versus as a child. And we have an easier time. Like, she goes on to do a Hitchcock film, Victor Victoria. Like, these are very different genres. She did... what was the film where she worked with Blake? Most of them she worked with Blake. But there was a nude scene.
S.O.B.
Yes. That's very different, which Haley did one as well, but it took her a lot longer to get there. And she had to do British indie film, essentially, to be able to get away with it with her American image.
Yes, I feel Haley didn't have as much agency in the choices that she could make, and that was something Julie really took to heart. So Haley's under 7-year deal with Disney, and we get some reflection from Haley that there were roles she wasn't quite interested in, but she had to do them. Whereas Julie's, the one that jumped to my mind, was she was offered the role of, I believe, Truly Scrumptious in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and she's like, as much as I would have loved to work with Dick Van Dyke, with the 2 choreographers from Mary Poppins, and of course the Sherman Brothers, all lovely people, I just had to say no because it felt too familiar. I didn't want to be cast in that. I have heard similar stories that she was offered the role of Eglantine Price in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and also turned that down, but I was curious if she was going to mention that when she mentioned Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but she did not. So she definitely was conscious in the choices she was trying to make in the roles that she wanted, in the variety of roles that she wanted to portray, and the substance she was looking for from these various characters.
And obviously a big difference in Disney careers. Haley made 6 films under contract for the Walt Disney Company and Disney Studios, and Julie Andrews, she only did 1. Yeah, in this book. I mean, she'll come back later, but within 30 some years, she only did 1. And then some television spots, being a spokesperson, doing some TV openings, or performing a number for an award show or something. Very little after Mary Poppins with Disney. One other big difference I want to talk about, I think kind of going back to that agency piece, parents were a big influence in both Haley and Julie, but Julie's parents have a much different influence. And I think with Haley, her parents, because she was a child actor, made a lot more choices for her. Whereas Julie, she's making a lot of choices for her parents. She, while both Haley and Julie were financially supporting, Julie had a much more active role, I guess, because being an adult, taking care of her mother, her stepfather, as they had some failing health, as well as depression and alcoholism. Like, she had a lot more influence over their life, whereas I think they had more influence over her life until she was able to break free.
And I think part of that is the difference in the ages. These books are essentially taking place
around the same time.
I was gonna say almost at the same time. I think Julie's is covering 25 years and Haley's might be shifted, like it ends probably a little earlier. I think Haley's ends in the 70s, and this of course ends in the 80s, and Haley is younger. So I feel like part of that is Haley's navigating it as we see her childhood and coming into very young adulthood. Like it ends when she's 20 something, whereas Julie, we're getting a longer span in her life, and it'd be interesting,
like late 20s into her 50s, I think.
Yeah, it would be interesting to contrast maybe Julie's perception in her first memoir, because I wonder if that would mirror Haley's experience more, like having her parents in control of her work, because that's the whole reason Julie gets into vaudeville, is what I learned from the intro.
Interesting. Well, anything else we want to talk about? Her parents were a big part of this book. So she credits how much they helped foster her love of singing. Oh, also a big difference. Julie is quite the singer, whereas Haley was very insecure about her singing. So she gets that from her parents. They often, she's constantly trying to bring the family back together at holidays and bring them to California to spend time together. How did you see the role of her parent?
I mean, I saw her taking care of them more, that being Julie, being responsible for them, because in this text, I think one of the last chapters is when Julie's mom passes away, so you have more of that responsibility.
I think also a big influence of her parents was she becomes a parent as well in this book, and we get to spend a lot of time with her as a parent, between the birth of Emma and the earlier part of the book, with her first husband Tony, to her 2 stepchildren, Jenny and Jeff, and then her 2 adopted children, Joanne and Amy. We get to spend a lot of time with her as a parent and as an evolving parent, between biological and adopted and stepchildren. And I think seeing her also take care of her family and brothers and sisters really did inform her as a parent. The choices she was making, how much she was trying to make sure everyone was together as much as possible, under the best health care. I think that influenced her decisions a lot, the relationship she had with her parents, into the type of parent she became that we saw throughout the book.
And I do feel a lot of that balance takes its toll. And what I appreciated was that Julie Andrews talked very openly about seeing a therapist. She does use the term analyst and psychoanalysis, which was more appropriate, or reflective of the 60s and 70s when she began that journey. How do you feel that her openness about therapy and mental health influenced her memoir?
So I'd be curious to know if she were to write this memoir in the 80s, if she would have included it. Or if the place we're in now, I mean, we still have a ways to go with talking about mental health and seeking help and the stigmas around mental health, but we're in a much better or improved place than we were in the 60s and 70s. Psychoanalysis, my AP psych teacher is coming out for a second. Psychoanalysis was a big thing in the 60s and 70s. It was like the new science. So people were interested in it, but it was still a taboo to be like, I'm seeing a therapist, because then people assumed that there's something wrong with you. So I credit that she sought therapy when she needed it. She encouraged her brother, her husband, her children to use therapy, and she stuck with it. But I think it's also important to know that she's writing this in 2020 during the pandemic is when it came out. So even the pandemic also is a resurgence of rethinking how we see and use mental health services. So I think for me, her writing about this also emulates the time that we're in, that it's okay. And even to an older audience, maybe, like, I've been seeing a therapist since the 1960s. That's okay. And it's okay. So I think it speaks to all audiences who might be thinking about or do see therapy, so you can feel related to her in that sense, or validated that even she uses those services too. But also maybe reaching an audience who grew up in the times that she did, that they are viable and helpful resources.
Yeah, as somebody who has used that resource, I just, as I said, appreciated the candidness. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting us to go there, but I appreciated how much she said she gained from it and the different lessons along the way. And it's a constant staple throughout. It's, kind of how she grappled with some difficult situations in her life that we face within the memoir.
And we get a lot of that reflectiveness too, which we get from the diary entries as well. But when she's reflecting about, I had to seek help because of these questions, I think we also in her writing saw that character development over time, her character arc, where she's learning about herself. And we get to hear that from that internal monologue that you do get to vocalize in therapy. So maybe she's also come to write it better because she's had the time and the assistance to sort it out herself.
It complemented the diary entries very well.
So we talked about people in her family, her parents, and she has many people. Several names are dropped in this book over and over, and you revisit these people again and again between her family and her Hollywood circle. But much of the book really focuses on her relationship with her second husband, Blake Edwards, and her daughter, Emma. So what do you think about these two pivotal figures in Julie's life, and then how they affected her career?
I didn't realize she had been married twice, but Blake Edwards becomes a major character in this text. Just for background, she met Tony Walton, her first husband, and Emma's father, when she was rather young. That's kind of, I would say, it's fair to say, her first big love. He is a Broadway costumer, set designer. Walt asks him to do the costumes, the costumes and the sets for Mary Poppins. Cool to see that part of their journey, but she starts to realize he's in New York a lot, she's in Hollywood as her film career is blossoming. It just doesn't work out, and that happens sometimes. And then Blake Edwards enters her life. He's heading from the psychoanalyst, and she's heading to the psychoanalyst. They keep passing each other, and I think he rolls down her window one day, and the rest is history. So he is probably the backbone of this book. Their relationship, their trials and tribulations. She was candid about what they went through. So I found that very interesting. He's a prominent director, and I don't think I realized how much they had collaborated. They really only reference Victor Victoria in the back of the book part that you read earlier in the episode, but it's pretty much probably a third of her work is with Blake. But that was really great to learn about their collaboration and her perspective on his projects. And then Emma grows up through the book. She is expecting Emma when Walt Disney shows up backstage at Camelot and says, I want you to do Mary Poppins. And she says, I'm expecting a baby. And he's like, that's okay, we'll wait. And she's like, oh, okay. Wasn't expecting that. So Emma, goes from being a baby up into being an adult in her 20s over the course of the book, and you could just tell what a great mother she was while reading this.
Yeah, and we get a lot of, I think what titles the book Homework, the fact that they're two separate words, like work, it's going to take work to balance this life. And Blake presents, they're both creatives. There are times where they're doing separate projects, so they both have to go their creative paths, which complement each other, but also create those hardships of then how do we balance our family. She has moments where she says, we need to figure out how to make this marriage work, or we have to end it. And that kind of snapped him into reality, or seeking extra help. Going back to his analyst, I think there was a period where he stopped. So that was interesting. But then also with Emma, like I said, with her parents, the way she wants to be a parent, but then also, I think this is also a good story for children of divorced parents. Emma, we learn a lot about Emma. And then I think that also comes through because she helped write the book, that we got a lot of her as well, and her insights into how, Emma was trying to balance the life that she wanted, which a lot of that was in New York with her father. Even though she had such a close relationship with her mother, her career path was looking to be New York. So there's a period where she wants to stay more with her father, and we see Julie have to grapple with that. So I think between these two people, we get the work part, the homework, that balancing of her career and her home life, that this book really centers on.
Yeah, and Julie herself is the child of divorced parents, which I also learned from her intro. Again, was grateful for that SparkNotes recap of the first memoir. So as the child of divorced parents myself, I certainly appreciated her views both on being a child of divorced parents and then being a parent in that same situation. That was certainly very comforting to me, and greatly appreciated her work as an author. But she has not only authored her 2 memoirs, but also several children's books and a collection of poems as well. Were you aware of these other books? And what do you think about her just as an author, since we are a book podcast?
I knew nothing. I had no idea that she had written other books. And her first children's book, Mandy, came out in the 70s. So she's been an author a lot longer than I realized, but other than just these memoirs. And I love that she's a fiction children's writer. I think that's really different. Also writing poetry, which makes sense. She's a lyricist. She's a singer. So poetry to me, I see the connection there. Having 5 children and telling them stories and being around theater and being around movies, like I can see where she gets that creative inspiration. And Blake was such an incredible writer. She said he always, while he loved directing, you just saw him light up when he was writing and had all these ideas. So her environment, I think, just lent her to start her own writing. And I love the story of how she started with Mandy. It was a parent management tool. She was trying to get her kids to like help keep the house clean, like put your toys away, put your shoes away. And they decided to play a game. Like, if you don't do XYZ, your responsibilities, you have to, I guess this is a British term, do a forfeit or something like that, where someone says like a punishment of some sort. And she said, I'll be a good parent. I have to do it too. I also have to put my shoes away and whatever. And she did it. And the kids called her out and she said, okay, what's my forfeit? And Jenny said, write me a story, or tell me a story. And then Mandy was born from that. So I love that spark of inspiration. I thought that was such a fun story. But yeah, I was blown away that she's written multiple books, and I now need to get my hands on them.
I knew she had written a children's book, but I feel like she's done one within the past 10 years, and maybe an article about that showed up on my Facebook not too long ago. But I thought, this is going to sound really mean, like I thought it was more of a gimmick, like, oh, we got Julie Andrews to write this kid's book and slap her name on it. But I didn't realize, like you said, that the depth of her experience as a writer, and that it originated when her children were children. So agreed there that I would love to explore those and see her take on fiction, because as I can tell from this, she's a great writer and storyteller in general.
So in the back of the book, so after the epilogue, there is a page also by Julie Andrews. And if I counted this right very quickly, including the 2 memoirs and her collection, 2 collections of her 1 collection of poems, we got 35 books. And then also Emma Walton Hamilton, she's also written Raising Bookworms, Getting Kids Reading for Pleasure and Empowerment. So this is a strong literary and writing family between screenplays, children's books, poetry, but also memoirs, but then also from Emma getting people to read, like the psychology of reading. So they're quite literary people. So yeah, I might have to pick one up. That might need to be some of those new books that like I give friends and family for their children or something. Change it up from like Little Engine That Could or Magic Tree House, something different. So while an author, we're here because of her film career. So let's talk films. She mentioned several films in here, again, from Mary Poppins 1964 through That's Life 1986. We get quite a few, at least 10 pictures that she talks about. Do you have a favorite, or from the memoir, any good stories that really stuck out to you that added to your experience of Julie Andrews on screen?
This answer is going to be twofold. And that is that my favorite film is Mary Poppins, and we will circle right back to that. But I did not realize the depth of her filmography. I know that she has been in the industry for a long time, and like I know that she's had a prolific career, but going through her IMDb as I was preparing to read this, I was like, oh, I never heard of this movie. Oh, she did a Hitchcock film? Like, would not have guessed that if this were Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and she was one of my 4 choices for actresses in a Hitchcock film. You know, you think of like Grace Kelly for sure.
I'll admit, same. My familiarity with her on film prior to the early 2000s, prior to Princess Diaries and Eloise, is Mary Poppins, Sound of Music, and I have watched Victor Victoria a few times. That was one of my mom's favorites. So that is one I have seen probably 3 times in my life. It's been a little bit. But those were really the only ones I knew of. And yeah, like, you know, she's been in the industry. You know, there has to be other films, but I had no idea just how many. And again, like you said, different genres. And I really need to poke through. I don't think too many of them are available on HBO Max. So I need to find, like, I'm really interested in That's Life. That really stuck with me at the end. Blake was going through such a rough period that they were trying to find anything to pull him up. And usually when he's working on something and writing. And that's when I think she had that breakthrough moment with him of like, we need to make this work or we need to go other ways because it's pulling the family apart. And he ends up writing That's Life, which is almost semi-autobiographical.
Oh, pretty much. Yeah, that's what she was alluding to, I got.
And it helped him work through some things. And so I'm like, I kind of want to watch it now because we just read the story.
Oh, so many.
Let's see it on screen.
Films. I'm like, I want to watch the Hitchcock one. I had never heard of the Americanization of Emily, but that's her film in between Mary Poppins and Sound of Music. So that appealed to me, just being very different in its content. I know the iconic scene of Bo Derek running on the beach in 10, but I've never seen 10. I was like, didn't know Julie Andrews was in 10. So again, sounded like life was imitating art, because that was shortly after she had that discussion with Blake, and it sounded like her character is very much like That's Life, based on their own experiences. So I agree with you on the life imitating art. But also, this is going to sound a little dumb, but I don't think I realized that Mary Poppins was her first film. I knew Walt Disney, the story of him approaching her on Broadway to play Mary Poppins, but I don't know why, I just assumed she had done something else. So that is where the book kicks off, that she's going to Hollywood to film Mary Poppins. So that was a delight to kind of get right into the meat of what I wanted to know. And then the rest was all a wonderful dessert as I continued through the book.
Let's sit with Mary Poppins here for a second, because that is the beginning, and she does dedicate a lot of time with Mary Poppins because it's her first film. Like She really dives into like what she learns about being a film actress. And then later down the line, we don't get as much like production detail as we go from film to film. But she talks a lot about uh, the differences between being on stage, preparing, the shock of like not doing things in sequence. So she's like, I don't know how to react because I don't know where I am emotionally yet. We haven't filmed the first half, and you're telling me to jump to the end. So like those things, but also I loved when she talked about like the animation and like how there were some great stories about Mary Poppins in here. Was it Jolly Holiday the turtle? That their feet like they go across the pond on the back of a turtle. She's like, yeah, we were just standing on like an anvil, and then they covered it up, and she was like amazed by it. So those were some cool stories. Anything else that stuck out to you, Mary Poppins?
I loved, and this is a trend that continues as she talks about her other work as well, just how kind and in what high regard she holds her coworkers and her collaborators. Like, it wasn't name dropping to name drop, it was, I want to honor and call out each of these people that I collaborated with, from the choreographers to her co-stars. I feel like she named like nearly every major person in the film and like gave them a little shout out.
Yeah, talking about working with kids. And I'm going to sound naive now. Obviously, I love the carpet bag. So her explaining how the carpet bag trick on screen worked, I know it makes sense. Like I can, like looking at the film now, like you can see that there's a slight difference between like Michael under the table, like trying to search for where all the stuff's coming from, and then the rest of the picture. But it was great just finally hearing like this is how it's done.
And Mary
And
Poppins absolutely holds up in its special effects.
yeah,
I
it's
feel
great.
like it's something
The talk
that
of practical effects is amazing.
we in 2022, or even when we were kids watching it on VHS in the 90s, I feel like we almost took it for granted because, you know, CGI was coming up and it's like, oh yeah, movies have great effects. That movie has,
It's incredible.
you can't, she goes into filming the I Love to Laugh scene and how they made sure that you couldn't see the wires and filmed it in a certain way. I'm like, yeah, we really take Mary Poppins for granted in that regard.
Yeah, so if you were naive like me and don't know how the carpet bag trick worked, she said there was a hole in the table, a hole in one of the bags, and literally she was just picking things up off the floor and pulling it through the bag. But then they filmed Michael separately, just like looking under the table, and then they just layered, yeah, they just spliced it on top.
Like the
Very
Parent
much
Trap.
like the Parent Trap.
We both had it click at the same time. I saw it in your eyes.
But yeah, but the amount of work that goes into that as well. Like I know CGI is not easy. There's a lot of technical skill that goes into that, but the amount of filming you have to do, and who was the role? She mentioned it a few times. A continuity person.
Oh yeah, that was their job, was to make sure there was continuity between each shot. And she mentions them in regards to the Sound of Music as well.
I never would have thought of that.
Changing. I do want to talk about Sound of Music.
Like insane. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, we can talk about that because that is a 20th century Fox film, so it is now.
So she has two.
It's available on Disney Plus as well as Mary Poppins. But also just, I would say, tough question. Do you think her role as Maria Von Trapp or Mary Poppins is more iconic? For me, it's Mary Poppins.
Same. I think it depends though on the lens that you came from. Whichever one you were introduced to first, that's going to be the iconic role.
That's fair.
Because they both have strong singing. They both have beautiful cinematography. I think in terms of emotion, Maria Von Trapp.
Okay.
In terms of like emotional
journey that character goes through.
And the songs that she has, I mean, Feed the Birds gets me every time, but I think there's a stronger heartstring pulled in Sound of Music. Especially, she said, being a child in World War II and now doing a film based in World War II. Now having that story, I think I would watch that. I haven't watched that film in forever.
It's on Disney Plus.
I know. That is a hard question. Which one's more iconic?
I can't decide, but I love them both, and so it was great to get both of these like right within the first 5 or 6 chapters. just to touch on Sound of Music, I appreciated her sharing her experience, filming on location in Austria, working with each of those kids. Again, she named each of them and had a sentence of kind words to say about each of the Von Trapp children. I was like, this is so nice.
And then recently, didn't they do a reunion?
I think they did.
Oh, so cute.
I know they've done different reunions over the years. This is going to be a weird core memory unlocked, but I feel like I remember when Oprah was still on. Like, they filmed a reunion on Oprah, and that would have been, like, at least 15 years ago.
I did like the story, so talking about iconic scenes. So we had Mary Poppins with the carpet bag, the hilltop, the hills are alive with the Sound of Music. I loved her story of the helicopter that had to take that shot. And just like the things they had to do because they needed it for the sweepiness. We don't have drones in 1960 something. So they had to literally take a helicopter, but that meant her hair is blowing everywhere and her dress is blowing everywhere and debris is like grass and sand, like whatever is all over the place. So they had to do it multiple times to get it right and to not be too windy. And reading her frustrations while doing it, it was also, the way she wrote it was humorous as well. And I had a lot of fun reading that. But now, like, you see that opening in so many things. It's like popular GIF now for multiple things as well. But now I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to watch that anymore without thinking about a helicopter doing that, which I don't know why I never thought about. Obviously they're using a helicopter, but again, like you said, practical effects, the extent people had to go to get those shots, to get
the magic of movie making has changed. Yeah, and I feel this is when she calls it her Hollywood years, I think it is a major point in Hollywood. Maybe not necessarily Hollywood's golden age, like that would be more of the studio system some would consider, but still within a time of practical effects and a little bit of, you get a taste of the studio system in regards to Blake Edwards' contract. Was there anything you wanted to touch on with Victor Victoria? You said that was a big part of your childhood.
It's been a long time again since I've watched that one. Since recently acquiring HBO Max, that's now one that we have. We had it on VHS, like a VHS that my grandfather taped himself. So it's kind of old. It's kind of my grandmother's, who brought me up on my love of movie musicals. So it was one that she would watch, and then my mom did at home. But it really was only one that if we caught it on TV or if my grandmother wasn't using her VHS. So I don't own it. So now that I think it is on HBO Max, I think I recently saw it added. So I do need to revisit it. I don't remember much, but I think that might have been the first film or something I've ever seen that referenced the LGBTQ community, that referenced drag. Obviously, culturally, within the time it was made, that's not going to reflect the LGBTQ community as we know them. But it was the first time I ever thought about that. And I really liked her story, though, too, of how it really brought back her time working in vaudeville, because it's more of a stage performance and comedy, but also role playing. So how she was able to use her stage experience for this. But then also that collaboration with Blake, like this is the culmination of them doing multiple films together. And it's kind of one of their masterpiece together. So I'd have to revisit and then probably reread. I bookmarked a couple things that I wanted to go back, like some of the songs that she mentioned and stories around like coming to that music. And one of the great stories talking about how she had to imagine how men acted or how changing, how she stood. She said she was like, I had to put my hands in my pockets a lot, not only because they did, but because then I wouldn't be overly expressive with my hands, which we both are. If anyone could watch us doing this podcast, I'm moving my arms right now. So things that are seen as inherently feminine, really thinking about gender and how society views gender, I thought was interesting. So I'd want to go back and rewatch that, not only for her stories, but also to rethink about look at the LGBTQ community, of how that was portrayed in the 1970s. I think would be interesting as well.
Yeah, it's on my list to watch. I was hoping to fit it in ahead of recording, but I did not have the time. But now I have a list of a lot of Blake Edwards and Julie Andrews movies to watch. I'm really interested, as you are, in their collaborations beyond that film. But what, of course, brought us here was Disney. So in the book, her work with Disney really was limited to Mary Poppins. As you said, the time frame of this memoir was 1962 to 1986. So that is ending 5 years before she gets her Disney Legend honor. And her contributions in that time included her film debut as Mary Poppins in 1964, which she wins the Academy Award for Best Actress. Then in 1971, she was a host and performer for the TV opening of Walt Disney World. She dedicated an episode of the Julie Andrews Hour TV show to Disney in an episode entitled A Salute to Disney. In 1973, she appears as a special guest on the TV tribute program Walt Disney: A Golden Anniversary Salute. That would be celebrating 50 years of the Walt Disney Company, which we are now coming up on 100. Crazy. That was a side note. But in 1981, Julie featured prominently in another tribute special, Walt Disney One Man's Dream, broadcast as part of the Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color TV series, not to be confused with the 2003 One Man's Dream at Disney's Hollywood Studios. And in 1985, she appeared as a special guest on the Disneyland 30th Anniversary TV special, singing another poignant rendition of When You Wish Upon a Star. So she did quite a few things, some of which were also, again, not mentioned in our Disney A to Z bio. But why do you think she only included Mary Poppins in her memoir?
It took me a bit to think about this because you and I started texting that immediately, because these are things we are familiar with, like the 1971, like the Walt Disney World Resort opening special. And she did mention other things. At first I was like, maybe it's because we're only focusing on films, Mary Poppins being the only film. But she did mention work with the Muppets. She did mention the Julie Andrews Hour, which is television, not film. She did mention some other TV spots and concerts she did for charity, as well as just a concert series that she did. She did a tour in Tokyo twice. So while the film is while the book concentrates on her Hollywood years, she does talk about other projects that weren't Hollywood based. So I was a little baffled. But I think maybe to really highlight the other things she's not as known for, to give that space where, because I think, like we said, as soon as you say, oh, name a movie, Julie Andrews, you're going to go to Mary Poppins and Sound of Music. So maybe for the sake of readability and pacing and all the stuff they wanted to include, maybe those got cut to give space to focus on like those collaborative efforts with Blake, and also those projects that were both exciting but also challenged her with balancing her home life.
I'm thinking that something like these TV specials is probably one day of shooting, maybe two. I don't know. I'm not in TV production, but I feel it's probably a very quick cameo or segment to shoot. So you're right, it wouldn't fit structurally within focusing more on the project way that she's organized each of these chapters. What was interesting to me, though, is that she mentioned the Muppets several times. Like, as an aside, she's like, and then I did this thing with the Muppets. Like, it would just be that, but she mentioned the Muppets at least 3 times.
Yeah. So she went on the Muppet Show.
Yes.
And then she had them on the Julie Andrews Hour.
And then there was something else she taped with them. But yeah, the Muppets were mentioned by name 3 times.
That one surprised me.
Huh, okay.
That was a little surprising. The other big thing we said was surprising as we were both reading, we both went back. We're like, did she say anything about Walt Disney's death?
Right.
And she didn't.
No.
I thought that would make it in here since that was the beginning of her film career. Even Haley, she had, I think it was only 2 paragraphs.
But it was a major moment for Haley, and I feel it was a major moment around the world. Not just saying that as a Disney podcaster, but we've certainly had many others reference in their autobiographies or books how they felt when Walt died. And so I noticed that stark contrast too, because she either, now I can't remember if she mentions the death of John F. Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy, but both. One of the Kennedys.
She mentions both.
Okay. She mentions that. And so I was like, oh, wait, that's like very close in time to when Walt Disney passed.
She also mentioned Watergate.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time at Vietnam, but I think that's also because she adopts 2 daughters from Vietnam. And that's also a big part of her charity work. So I like the time we had in Vietnam. But yeah, she mentions a lot of historical events, which really ground you and in the time, and again, recognize history is always so interesting that you forget that things happen at the same time. So also putting into perspective, like where we are as a country with, or what's happening in the world with what's happening in her life. But yeah, she didn't mention Walt Disney's death.
It was fitting for Haley for sure, because he kind of controlled her early film career. But I would think certainly Julie felt something when she felt the news. I mean, that's the role in which she won her first Academy Award for Best Actress in her film debut, nonetheless.
Thanks,
so,
Jack Warner.
That was a funny story. I knew that story already, but
I love that she included it. Like, it's not myth, it's true.
Oh yeah, you can watch the clip.
Yeah, but it's still like gives it
more
credit.
weight.
Yeah, but yeah, that was a little shocking to me. The rest I would have been fine. Like didn't get mentioned, but that's really the only thing that I wish she mentioned as a Disney fan coming to her memoir that I would have liked to hear. And she talked a lot about Walt in those early like 4 chapters and the premiere, even being with Lillian. She even mentioned her brief encounter with P.L. Travers, but nothing about his death. And I would be curious to know, like, with the death of Walt Disney, what did that mean though for her as Mary Poppins? Her film was huge.
I agree, that was surprising, but that's okay. We got so much more information, so I really can't complain because I enjoyed it overall.
But with that focus on Mary Poppins, that brings us to her being a Disney legend. So Julie Andrews was inducted as a Disney legend in 1991 in the category for film. Unlike our past legends we discussed this summer, Julie does not have multiple films, and when she was inducted, her contributions were that one film and those couple TV spots. She does not have the almost 50-year career as Tom Nabby, the 6 films like Haley Mills. So thinking about these handful of contributions between 1964 to 1991 when she is inducted, why do you think she qualified as a Disney legend with that shorter resume? As a reminder, the 3 criteria for the award are 1, imagination, the power of an idea; 2, the gift of skill, discipline, and craftsmanship; and 3, magic, the spark that ignites imagination and skill combined to create a new dream.
I'm going to say this. I absolutely think Julie Andrews is deserving of being a Disney legend. I was surprised to find out the year, which I think is kind of what we're getting at in how this question was written. If you had to say, Courtney, when was Julie Andrews inducted as a Disney legend? Would have thought it was 2005 or later, like more of a recent addition. When I thought it was 1991, I was like, huh, that is interesting because that's before Princess Diaries, which we are big fans of. That's before the Disneyland 50th celebration, though Mary Poppins is amazing and iconic. I tried to look at the class that she was inducted with to see if there was anything symbolic there. Like, we know Tom Nabby got inducted in 2005 with Disneyland's 50th with a lot of other people who were responsible there, and there are the screenwriters of Mary Poppins including in that, Don DeGraudy and Bill Walsh. So I was like, maybe it was a Mary Poppins thing, but then I was doing the math and I'm like, well, it wasn't like an anniversary of Mary.
It would have been
Poppins.
30 years since they started the project, not from its release, but when they started.
But when you get like a DVD, it's not it's like it's the 50th anniversary of its release. So that was interesting to me. But I do think she was deserving.
Oh, absolutely. I do not begrudge at all. She is a Disney legend. I think what it comes down to is the weight of Mary Poppins. Like how culturally relevant that movie is, that film is, its craftsmanship, the costuming, like everything about it is art. And it's so quintessential Walt Disney. And it's like the first live action film people think of. So maybe just the weight of that film and its success for the company is what, like, she only needed to do one film to be a Disney legend because of the cultural impact of Mary Poppins.
Okay, but here's the weird thing in my brain. Haley Mills became a Disney legend after Julie Andrews. Haley Mills is inducted in 1998. And interesting, I think that's also when Dick Van Dyke was inducted. So I don't know, I feel like in my brain they should have been switched, like Haley Mills 1991 and then Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke get to become Disney legends together. That just makes more sense.
I wonder if these meeting minutes exist. Like,
Yes.
the people who get to pick. Like, I know Dave Smith was on. So the first round, the opening, the inaugural class of Legends was 1989. So she's in the second class of Disney Legend.
Horrible, because it sounds like we don't think she deserves to be a legend. I think
she's absolutely deserving.
Yes, I'm just so surprised on the timeline of this. But I agree with what you say. Like, Mary Poppins is huge for the Walt Disney Company. It is art in the way that it integrates practical effects and, you know, the blend of animation and cinema, which they had done before in other movies. But I feel like Mary Poppins is the one we think of the most. So I get it. Like, even if she had only done Mary Poppins, 100% deserving of this. It's just the timeline that I was like, would not have guessed that in the way that we have now seen Disney Legends play out.
I wonder if Mary Poppins had a big resurgence, though, in the 90s. Like, the way we're seeing, so us being in our home video, so that would probably give it a resurgence, but also us now being in our 30s, how we're nostalgic for childhood. So this would have been children who grew up with Mary Poppins now getting on a home video as adults, now introducing it to their children 30 years later. I wonder if it kind of, like, the new impact of Mary Poppins came back around again. And so they're I don't want to say, again, she's not undeserving. She absolutely deserves this. She's a wonderful, oh my gosh, like, I can't think of a better person to be a Disney legend. But yeah, only having one film, like, just, it has to be the cultural impact of Mary Poppins.
I think what we're getting hung up on is just what the Disney Legend Award has become. And this is kind of a fitting tangent for our last episode of this. Like, it feels like they are very conscious choices now that it's done on the scale of the D23 Expo. Like, in 2009, all of the voices of Disney princesses were inducted together. Like, Anika Noni Rose was just about to be in Princess and the Frog, and they're like, we're going to induct you, and we're going to induct everyone. Jodie Benson, Paige O'Hara, Linda Larkin, all of them. Your voice to Disney princess, you're now a Disney legend, which, amazing. Like, they do little themes. If you look at the list of who's being inducted next month, most of the cast of Frozen is being inducted together. So yeah, I just feel like maybe, like, we are approaching it from what the award has become and how it is more of like, we're gonna honor this anniversary or this big star, whereas, like you said, I'd be really curious to hear the meeting minutes, like, in these discussions, right? How has that meeting changed over the years, and how has the criteria adjusted?
And also by 1991, from Homework, she's transitioning, she says at the end, around 1986, 87, she's transitioning back more so to Broadway and the stage, but she just had a 20-some amazing 2 decades of film. So maybe it's also just a way of, like, here's a wonderful actress who has an incredible career. Well, guess what? She got started at Disney.
Yeah.
So kind of a way to, like, also claim her into the Disney company again. Like, yes, she only did one. Mary Poppins, though, is incredible, but she's incredible, and she's part of our family, too.
Well, if we had the chance to interview Julie Andrews, what would you want to ask her?
Well, if we got to do an interview, first, I think just the nature and the niche of our podcast, I'd want to focus on her as an author, and I think that's something that's not as explored. I think we could find so many interviews with her talking about her time in film and on Broadway and vaudeville. So I think I'd want to spend more time with her, learning more about her writing and children's books and poetry and how those came up alongside her film career. Like, the fact that she's written 35 books over her span of her career, while also doing films and television, concerts, like, that's incredible. So I think I'd foremost, also being the podcast that we are, want to focus on her writing and how her film and television career informed her writing.
I feel, just thinking of her as a Disney legend and everything that she's done, I want to know what she wants her legacy to be to the world. You know, this is a talent that has spanned generations. Mary Poppins is still beloved. You know, she got reintroduced to Disney fans when we were young as Queen Clarice Rinaldi in Princess Diaries. She does she is part of the Minions franchise. That's big with kids now. She voices Gru's mom. She did Shrek. We're allowed to talk about those things as well. Like, what does she want her legacy to be, or like what's important to have as part of her legacy?
And then I think as Disney fans, we'd also want to ask her about, or I would ask her about, did she ever get to Disneyland with Walt? Because that was pretty common. Like, we've read through multiple memoirs, even before the summer, that Walt would bring his guests. He even brought P.L. Travers to Disneyland. So did she ever get to go to Disneyland with Walt Disney? And then maybe we can ask her about her experience and feelings when she learned about Walt's passing as well. Normally, if we did get to interview her, we would ask our author questions, and she actually answers one of our questions. So we always ask our authors what advice they would have for new writers, and she ended her epilogue chapter with advice for aspiring performers, but I think it works for writers too. I think it's just good advice in general. So I want to read that quote and then talk about how we think this quote summarizes and is a good ending for homework. She says, quote, "Learn your craft. Do your homework. Opportunity will come along when you least expect it, as it did for me. You may not even recognize it at the time. Your job is to be as ready as possible when the good fortune comes your way." End quote.
I think that applies to acting, to writing, to really anything that is your own passion.
Yeah. She talks frequently. She mentions, how humbled she is, being able to use her talents, being able to learn her craft, but the whole theme of homework is it takes work. Talent alone is not enough, but also you can do anything if you try, if you learn it, if you dedicate some time and passion to it. But then also that's what's going to open doors and opportunities. So I guess to a writer, it'd be like we've heard before, like you got to just start somewhere.
That's you doing your homework.
Exactly. Yeah, I like how she used the word homework, one word.
Yes.
But it also brings you back to thinking about the title.
Well, we sometimes like to leave optional homework for our listeners and our selections of additional resources that you may be interested in. So I love any excuse to bring up the Muppets, which I already have on this show. So I'm going to recommend season 2, episode 17 of The Muppet Show, in which Julie Andrews was that special guest. This is available on Disney Plus, and it originally aired in 1977. So I felt it complemented the time period in her career covered here, kind of being right towards the middle of that. The Muppet Show was produced by Lord Lou Grade. He's also mentioned a few times in Andrew's memoir because he was the producer of her own variety specials. Now it makes sense that there was a lot of crossover there. I just thought this was a fun connection, and I'm going to use any excuse to recommend Muppet content to all of you.
So I'm also going to reference television specials. So first, among her many awards, Julie Andrews was also a Kennedy Center Honors recipient in 2001. So I highly recommend watching the tribute performances. I always love watching the Kennedy Center Honors. It's like a Tony Awards, but for like all of the arts, because there's always performances and tributes, and I get emotional every time. And oh my God, Carol Burnett is on it and sings to her. And after all the stories you get in homework of her and Carol Burnett's friendship, like it makes you so emotional. So I highly recommend watching that, available on YouTube. I also recommend the Julie Andrews Hour episode, A Salute to Disney. So her television series, but also Disney. Both are available on YouTube. I will link them in the show notes. And as previously mentioned in our discussion, we're also going to recommend, obviously, her first memoir, Home, a Memoir of My Early Years, her children's books, her collection of poems. We also, though, want to give another shout out again to friend of the podcast, Erin Wallace, who got to interview her for Broadway World to discuss her AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. The link to that interview is also included in our show notes. Highly suggest checking that out.
Wonderful. So lots to have homework for this book. But after 3 memoirs in our summer series, we thought it would be fun to return to one of our ongoing segments that it's been a while since we've done, and that is Fairy Tale Favorites. So join us reading Rapunzel, the original source material for Disney Animation Studios' Tangled. We will be reading from the Barnes & Noble Classics Grimm Fairy Tales if you would like to read the same version as us. But that story can be found in various places online or from your local library, and we will discuss both the film and the source material. But in the meantime, you can keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse, or email us with comments or ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes so others may find our podcast and read and listen along with us. You can keep up with me on Instagram at Great Gutsby or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on both Instagram and Twitter at Emily_McD.
Wonderful. Well, Emily, I know you found a quote for us because it is certainly much easier for you to do with a physical copy of the book than me pausing the audiobook to write down, as I appreciate you making the selection for us once again. What have you found from the book?
So we're actually going to end the episode with the very beginning of the book.
A very good place to start.
It's a very good place to start. So this is a poem that Julie Andrews wrote and opens homework with. It's a poem untitled from 1978. I thought it would be the practically perfect way to end this episode with her own words. So from Julie Andrews. I know that I am all that I am, and all that I am is full and ripe. All that I am is standing still, waiting and watching and bursting with life, holding the straining seams of my skin, my passion and wit and my sanity in, waiting for someone to soothe and to say, I understand. You're home.
What a great pick and wonderful interpretation of that reading. So thank you for selecting that, and thank you, our listeners, for joining us for our Legendary Summer series. We have only scratched the surface of the 289 Disney Legends, which will be growing soon. We cannot wait to see what books may come from the production class at the D23 Expo next month. But until our next episode, we hope you have had a legendary summer. Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.